I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular board meeting tonight, October 16th, 2025. We're also streaming on the DPS 109 YouTube channel. Can I get a motion, or can I call the meeting? I'm sorry. May a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so first on the agenda, Stronger Together 109. Kathy?
I'm going to have Kelly give us a follow-up
Ooh.
to last month's Stronger Together presentation.
Yes. So if you guys remember last month, we had Sean, who's in the black hoodie in that picture. He came to our board meeting and shared about the Crusoe Connect. Is it Connects? Connection? Crusoe Connections, where he worked with some of the teachers in the building to begin interviewing staff. He's interviewed bus drivers. He's interviewed maintenance crew. And it's been a profoundly invigorating thing for him, and it's been helpful for the school because then he'll report back, I think, on Fridays, like almost like an article, so the other kids can read about the questions and answers. So as a follow-up, I went today to Shepherd. I also met his partner in crime, Crusoe, not Shepherd, partner in crime, Jonah. You got to put first to follow up in blue then. You threw me with the red. I went to Crusoe to meet Sean and Jonah today, and they were delightful hosts. They are witty and engaging, and the best part was they had 3 prepared questions, but then they ended up asking like 25. And I thought that was great because you can tell how super, super engaged they were in the answers and wanting to then dig a little deeper. And they had their own great ideas. And it consistently and constantly reminds me that there are best wealth of information is just simply asking them and talking to them. So it was a delight. I was happy to be invited. We could have talked for hours. Yeah, they did. They're like, what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I don't have time for hobbies, but I will make one up. So it was great. One of their questions was, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing kids these days? And so it was a thought-provoking question. And yeah, they're great kids. Thank you to their teachers and all that for supporting this cool endeavor.
It really is about the connections that staff are making with each other and across the district. But we're going to give you one opportunity to get an X on your bingo board. It's try a new fruit or vegetable. So we've got kiwi berries.
I would, but I have chocolate.
We have no chocolate vegetables. We have a red cactus pear. Goes around.
You guys ain't
We have golden berries. Yeah. And rambutan. So I've started one. If you want to open up another, don't eat the seed. I'll give you the purple strawberry.
Looks like there's a lot of seeds.
So.
You eat the skin of this?
Yeah, you eat that whole. The only thing you don't eat whole is the rambutan. You peel it and you don't eat.
The toxic seed inside.
This is adorable. Uh-huh. But it throws you off, right? Because it looks like an olive. So we did this at the district office today, and like the conversations like you're having, it's creating connections. So feel free to take an X. If you do submit, did you have one? The golden, yeah. I like those better.
These are really good. They're really good. Kathy, what are the orange?
Golden berries. Golden berries. Yeah, so don't eat the skin and don't eat the seed. It is a little sweet. Those seeds are kind of interesting in the. We hope you do. We can get an ambulance here any minute. There's some productive struggle in opening it, right? Again, don't eat the seed. Yeah. So this was a great opportunity. There is also our swag store. So the winners at each building will do a random drawing, and the winners at each building will get to place an order at d109swag.com. So you can check that out. But it's a great way to create connection and a little friendly competition. The building that has the highest participation rate also gets an award of Smoothie Day. So free healthy smoothies. Dale would like the kale smoothie. Dale's kind of refusing to participate for the district office because he doesn't want to. You don't have to have the kale smoothie. It will be an option. So we are stronger and healthier together. Yeah.
Next on the agenda, Superintendent's Report and Recognition of Principals Week. Before I turn this over to Mr. Simic, the upcoming week of October 20th is proclaimed as Principals Week in Illinois. The board would like to acknowledge our 109 principals for their dedication to our students. And we'd like to acknowledge our 109 principals for their dedication to our students and all contributions they make to our community. We're incredibly grateful to have such an exceptional team. Mike?
All right. So, should I begin with the proclamation?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like to begin with your video?
That is the video. It is a very short, just
All right.
those are our principles.
So, I have a proclamation from the state of Illinois. Whereas school principals play an integral role in nurturing a positive student-centered culture in elementary and middle school across the state of Illinois, and whereas school principals are responsible for attracting and retaining the best teachers and support staff to ensure that each child receives equitable educational opportunities and services to reach their potential, and whereas it is the primary responsibility of the state of Illinois to provide adequate and equitable resources for schools so that all students have access to a quality education and foundation for a successful future, and whereas school leaders face many obstacles in supporting and educating our young people, and it is through their perseverance, passion, and hope-filled leadership that Illinois continues to produce quality, career-ready students, and whereas we must continue to encourage, support, and recognize our school principals who have a positive impact on Illinois students and the educational system in the land of Lincoln. And therefore, I, J.B. Pritzker, Governor of the state of Illinois, do hereby proclaim October 19th through the 25th, 2025 as Principals Week and October 24th, 2025 as Principals Day in Illinois to recognize principals and the Illinois Principals Association for all they do to help our children learn and succeed. Signed by the Governor of the State of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker.
Thanks, Mike.
Oh, not done
Oh,
yet.
yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So another update on True North. We've received the changes to the bylaws. The first reading was last night. The second reading will be in November. The commitment, I understand, for the second reading is that only typographical and very, very minor changes will be made between the first and the second reading. Based on the changes that we read just recently and which were reviewed last night in the first reading, it now appears to be in the district's best interest to continue on our path to exit. You may recall the conversation last time where that was not the case. It looked different. We will continue to evaluate, and for the moment, we'll be going down a dual pathway. I just don't want to surprise anyone if we come in the month of November and say, yes, it is in fact in our best interest to exit. I would say it's probably a 60-40 at this point that we would be looking to exit the co-op rather than to remain in it. A couple reasons for that. Some of the nuances in the bylaws relative to the funding model give us pause and make us question whether or not the co-op is going to come with a membership fee down the road, as was eliminated, at least in the initial iteration, in the conception or the reimagining of the co-op. That remains an open question for us. The second really significant question is the really significant administrative lift that the reconceived co-op would entail. We will have either 0 or 1 student in the co-op next year, and it could very well be that we spend a significant amount of administrative time in meeting after meeting as the co-op finds its way into the future. And so it could very well be in our best interest to exit now and spare ourselves that uncertainty as well as that significant administrative tax. So that's where we are at the moment. I would say stay tuned because things can continue to evolve. Our job throughout this was to be positive and keep an open mind. And given what we have most recently seen, it has turned the tables a little bit on what we expected to report tonight. And next item. Now we can switch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is School Board Members' Day recognition, November 15th, 2025. Mike?
I'm going to read you some more. Okay, whereas school board members are elected to sit in trust for their diverse communities, and in that capacity are charged with meeting the community's expectations and aspirations for the public education of their children, and whereas school board members are entrusted with the guardianship and prudent expenditure of tax dollars, and responsible for maintaining and preserving the buildings, grounds, and other areas of the school district that the community has put in their trust. And whereas school board members provide leadership that ensures a clear, shared vision of public education for their schools that sets high standards for the education of all students and requires the effective and efficient operation of their districts, and employs district staff to carry out the day-to-day duties of educating students. And whereas school board members adopt public policy to give voice to that leadership and employ a superintendent to administer board policy and regularly monitor the district's performance and compliance with state policy. And whereas school board members selflessly volunteer countless hours to public service with no compensation other than a bag from time to time. Whereas school districts face constant challenges and the strong, dedicated leadership provided by the Deerfield 109 Board of Education has allowed student learning and success to flourish, and whereas employers are supportive of their employees who serve as school board members. Many of our board members on this board are, in fact, employees of other organizations, and those organizations generously lend support and time. Employers give their employees the opportunity to serve the needs of the school districts and communities they represent, though through sometimes tremendous sacrifice to the employer And whereas school board members' decisions directly impact the quality of life and safety in their communities, placing the school board as the front line of local democracy and governance. Now, therefore, be it resolved, Deerfield Public Schools 109, along with the Illinois Association of School Boards, recognizes November 15th, 2025 as School Board Members' Day as a way to honor those citizens who devote their time and energy for the successful education of our children and our future leaders. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks to everybody else, too, here on the board for your volunteer. I heard a great joke at a ISB meeting that I was at last week of there was a rumor that we were all going to get a 100% raise this upcoming year, so it'll be great. All right, next on the agenda, community participation relative to matters on the meeting agenda. District 109 has 2 opportunities for public comment, whereas many organizations offer 1. Our policy stems from the community's longstanding commitment to public discourse and representation. We take all public comment very seriously, and while public comment is not a back and forth, but rather an opportunity for the board to listen, please know that we listen carefully. Our first period of community participation is solely for items related to the meeting agenda, and the second period of community participation near the end of the meeting is open for all matters. If you wish to comment, please fill out a community participation form located on the podium and hand it to Rebecca Rudd, who sits to my left. We will call you up one at a time to the podium to speak. Please limit all length of comments to no more than 3 minutes.
We don't have anybody.
Okay. Next on the agenda, informational items, 7.1, redefine 109. Mike and Kathy?
I think the key point, one change from.
Microphone.
One change since we last met and talked about our community outreach. We heard from Walden neighbors some concerns about the first rendering that they saw, which you see the smaller rendering there. And we met with our architects to hear those concerns, and the architects did a beautiful job of incorporating the feedback and came back with another rendering. And last week, we met with the neighbors again to present where this came from their feedback, and hear a little more from them. And the architects are working again to incorporate the further feedback. And the next version that they will come up with will be what will be shared in the next mailer that goes out to the community. We'll also share that on our website and update our presentations to include the latest and greatest versions of those. Mike, do you want to talk about that meeting with the neighbors or any feedback?
Yeah, I really thought the architects demonstrated that they had listened very carefully to the neighbors, and it was everything from concerns about what appeared to be a ring road around the property that really wasn't sitting well. It also was the proximity far north that was a significant concern. The location of the parking lot didn't resonate, and a number of other things. So they first demonstrated that they had listened and understood the concerns of the Walden neighbors. And then after that, they pulled out the new version and said, okay, this is how this version is responsive to the concerns that we heard you articulate, and we would like to hear more about how you feel about these concerns as well as anything else that might come up. And so there was a thoughtful and productive progression through, okay, this is what the new building looks like now, and then sort of piece by piece, fielding questions, but then also, have you thought about, could you? And then summary of the group was some folks that were there were more vocal than others, and some hadn't spoken, and one person in the back hadn't spoken throughout or asked a question and said, all right, do you have any key concerns or takeaways? He said, well, my real chief concern is there are a number of folks that are going to have small children in particular in that area, and can you devote some more time to what you can do as far as a location for an area to play, a playground or something like that? And so all of that feedback was really, really helpful. And we'll continue to iterate on that plan. Another part that came up was to what extent are you looking into potential alternative sites, swing sites? And turns out there are a number of people, a lot of resources in Deerfield 109, some of those folks being real estate brokers or with close connections to real estate brokers. So we spent some of this week following up on connections. One of the folks in the Walden meeting is in that industry and accompanied us to one of the sites, and so we're continuing to explore every possibility as we move forward.
What's the beige in this picture? Around?
Yeah, that's an asphalt surface, so it's designed to be a walking path. But one of the issues that we resolved, the concern about the ring road, the purpose of the ring road was fire trucks need to be able to access the back area of the property. But the concern was that, some folks would use that as through traffic, and that would be dangerous, in close proximity to those neighbors. So what they did is they shifted those areas to be large enough that a fire truck could pull through there and turn around to gain access to the back of the building. But on a normal day, that's not accessible to traffic. It's just a walking and a play area, hard surface.
Yeah. A couple other things, looking at the drawing, or the rendering is really interesting. So one of the things is by not having a flat edifice here, but stair stepping it, and lessens the visual impact of it. Moving it farther south, moving it, one of the suggestions was, can you move it farther to the east here? One of the things that nobody anticipated in the course of this was that, and this came out of our conversation with the Park District, with whom we continue to have really productive meetings, is that this large play area, if we put in a certain type of surfaces, it can check a number of ADA boxes for them. So somebody that has ambulatory issues can now have access to fields that they otherwise previously would not have had. And so you learn things as the more you process this, and sometimes it just sort of comes out of the blue. Another one of the issues for some of the neighbors is during a heavy rain event, there will be water that pools, and that's something that we can actually provide a benefit to the neighbors through our excavation work. One of the final things that is quite interesting in the process is that, we see, there's, green space in a variety of places, and, hey, the Park District can be happy because we have so much green space. Well, green space to us means one thing. To the Park District, if it is not flat, and if it is not well drained, it does not count as the kind of space that they want for green space. And so it's just because there's a lot of green doesn't mean it's the kind of space that they want. And so we can do a service to the Park District by ensuring you're going to be moving a lot of dirt here. And so we can check some boxes for them in the process.
Couple questions. Assuming the existing Walden is not, is there while construction is happening, is there any new additional impacts with the building so sistered up close to the existing building? And then a second question, was there also follow-up from the Wilmot families that you spoke about? I don't know if that, maybe it's on the next slide, but
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I think it would be nice to see distance from street as well, some more detail on those renderings, much similar to the details of the Walden.
Do you want to address the first question, John, and then I'll...
Yeah, I mean, I think that this concept hugs the existing building. So it's very purposeful about, being feasible to keep the existing facility open to serve the Kipling students as that campus would undergo complete renovation with an addition. But I think it's important, and as we've talked through these, throughout our community engagement, these are very early concepts of what these campuses would look like. And every site is going to undergo change before anything is finalized. And one of the things that's really important is that, if the community signals support to move forward with this plan, that's when we would begin, working on architectural designs and construction documents in earnest, because they incur significant cost. And as part of that process, we have a requirement to go through the village planning process. We send a Dear Neighbor letter to everybody that's within 250 feet of the building. We're committed to engaging in that process much sooner. So if we receive polling from the community and the community says, yes, we signal our support for this plan and we want to move forward, we're going to begin those conversations now with our contiguous neighbors, not just here at Walden, but at Wilmot, at South Park, and Kipling as well, so that we gather that feedback and that it's inclusive of the issues and concerns that are raised from our neighbors.
And Jeff and George from Archon talked about how, the work that they're doing now for these early plans will just help. If we find another swing site or if we don't, it's all good conversations, good information. We did hear from some Wilmot neighbors, the Marcy Court neighbors, and so we are having a small Zoom meeting with them tomorrow to answer some of their specific questions, and George and Jeff will be on that call too, if we need some feedback to change what we put out to the community before polling. I'm not sure there will be, I don't know if their questions will end up changing the renderings yet, but yeah, we are listening, and we'll be at Wilmot on Saturday for an information session. On October 24th, we're going to have Realtors. The Chamber of Commerce is hosting a lunch for Realtors. And we've added a virtual session on October 28th, which we will record and put on the website. And then our last in-person session right now, we may, with those changes at Walden, on Walden's renderings, and if there are any changes to Wilmot, we may choose to add another session or two in person, either before or concurrent with when polling goes out in early mid-November.
And this is a time that we put the board members on the spot. And if you have attended as a board member any of the sessions between our last board meeting and this, or if you were in attendance at the farmers market, we've had a number of public events. If you could give us 2 or 3 of your key takeaways or observations from your time engaging with the public on our question.
I went to both Patty Turner and the farmers market, and from Patty Turner, some of the questions that were raised is, have we looked at other districts, both regionally and potentially nationally, as to how they've renovated or done new construction? Questions about, would we ever consider selling alt bonds directly to the community? And what contingencies do we have in place for rising costs? So those were some questions raised at Patty Turner. And at the farmers market, my takeaway, a lot of people would like to know the years of the proposed construction and what the plans are for the kids currently going to school during those construction years. There are a lot of parents with, first graders and second graders and third graders that understand that this is going to impact several years of their kids' education, and just what does that look like for their children. There's been questions raised about why wouldn't we just renovate all of our campuses? Why are we proposing new construction? So those are productive conversations. Mike, you sort of alluded to it when you're pointing at the new Walden iteration, but just sort of what will the 2-story buildings look like from the neighbor's perspective, right? If you're in your second story of your house, what would that 2-story school look like for you? So those were but the farmers market and Patty Turner, there was a lot of turnout and good engagement, and they were great events.
You go. You good? I was at South Park with Rosie. The majority of the feedback that we got, or at least that I got, was that the presentation was excellent. I mean, people really appreciated the work that the administration put in, and thought it was just really wonderful. The feedback was so interesting too, because it ran the gamut from, this is very expensive and how are we going to manage this, to, I think it was because of South Park, why aren't we redoing all 4? Mm-hmm. Right? So it was interesting to get different dynamics. One question that came up a few times was, can we look towards other ways of funding? I think you talked about like alternative bonds, but some people were talking about sponsorships and could.
Tostitos
Yeah,
bowl.
I mean, honestly, yeah, they're like, can we be talking to local companies about money there? Other questions that were interesting were along the lines of, with the new, I guess, houses being built, how would that affect the referendum and how much people will owe? Is that going to be something that would change when new houses come in? I didn't know how to answer that. I referred them to John.
That's usually the answer,
I'm curious too, so I'd love to talk with you about that later. But yeah,
usually the response.
but yeah, everyone was overly impressed. I personally was extremely impressed by Rosie. I thought she honestly framed the discussion really well. Being able to focus on kind of now, the past, and the future to help everyone in the room really think about what we're really visualizing here and how big this change is going to be. So I just commend you. You did an awesome job. Yeah.
Rosie, your catchphrase, do you remember it? Because I'm going to be using it.
I didn't know what to say. I was at South Park with Mitch. The one thing I will say is that I was at Walden with Ray. Huge, just the temperature was very different. And it shows that, all the, residents that are coming to these meetings, they feel like they're being heard. And that was really, really good. I think I got a bunch of questions about why rush, why now. And I just try to remind people that it's a 5-year window. Like, this is something that has been, we've been talking about it. And then someone's like, well, if we waited a little bit longer, it would cost me a little bit more. And what I did, what I actually said is that there might be some people who could wait and we could charge more, it could cost more down the road, but we have to really consider the entire community, whereas some people can, like the 500 to 1,000 a year seems more affordable to others now. So it was just a matter of like trying to figure out, like answering some of the John questions really, because John left early that night. But he had to, I get it. So no, I thought it was really good. The South Park one was just excellent, talking to people. I am constantly, reminded of how different each building is when I'm in them, right? Because I was at the Kipling Pumpkin Fest, and you almost get lost in Kipling, even though I know it's sort of a rectangle. And then you're in Walden, and you walk like 10 steps, and you've hit the end, right? So it's just really, it's beneficial to be in the buildings. I was even talking to my 14-year-old, and he's like, I'd like to go into these buildings, because the kids only see their school. And so for them to get into the other schools to see the difference, it was really beneficial. So I really enjoyed the follow-up to the conversations that the Walden families were having. And then you start to recognize faces. So, and then you recognize them in different places. And so it was really good, just great conversation. So I enjoyed it. And that was my last one, I think, so.
Well, I'm going to say, because we're going to use this, Rosie in her recap saying, we always talk about educating the whole child, but a whole building is around that child. Yeah.
You're hearing from families that have gone to multiple events, and then they see the change that we've made, specific to Walden, but not necessarily only to Walden, right? Like, that change is going to ripple, but I think the reception on that change has been really impactful, and like, it's definitely resonated and people see it. So I think to be able to be nimble and active listening and be able to change quickly, I think that's been really helpful. I do think the questions continue to get more detailed, whether it is that, purchasing of bonds directly to invest within your own district, but also the idea of why aren't we saving any of the renovations we've done in the last 10 years? There's a lot of conversation around that. And then I think that is more of an education piece, right? Because, like, look, you had to keep the building, you needed space then too. And so, like, what would you have done for those 5 years of education 5 years ago? But also, logistically, the location of the new building doesn't allow us, right? So there is, and how we could continue to inform that, but there's definitely greater specificity on the questions, the why now piece, the different types of investment choices we've made prior, and, you know, how that impacts today, and then are we just going to quickly make some changes next? But, you know, again, just an overall positivity throughout, which I think is really refreshing to see, again, the larger, broader impact across the whole community.
I mean, the only thing that, I mean, I wasn't at any of the meetings, but I will say this, is that I've seen some of the feedback and had some conversations. And I think there's a natural inclination by anybody, like I would have this inclination when you hear something that you might not necessarily completely agree with up front, that all the work hasn't been done yet. Does that make sense? All right, so you see a lot of comments of, have they thought about this? Have they done this? We've been looking at this and talking about this for several years now, so we understand where we are. The public doesn't necessarily know, and that's why these meetings are so important. So if you're watching this, if you're watching this on YouTube, you have questions or you see those things, have people come to these information center sessions, have them come to the website so they can see that and get those questions answered, because all the work has been done. Obviously, there's more work that can be done and needs to be done until we're done, but we're still, I think in that process, I know at the bottom here, we still have the public opinion polling. Hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder, but there's still feedback that we need to get from the community. This was that process to do that before we can make a decision in December as a board. So this is some of these, you guys' participation and you're bringing the feedback back to all of us, I think is super critical for us to be able to make that decision for December. So.
Is it possible, we have a few more events lined up, is it possible to get, you know, a more kind of collected, you know, feedback that's come? I mean, that might be already out there and I just haven't been able to go to it to find, but questions that we find coming up in previous sessions, kind of put them all together so we are better, you know, resourced when we walk into an event as well. Prepared.
Yeah, we try to add on our website the asked and answered, and I think we've got most of them on there, but if we're missing something, let me know and we'll add that. But if we can get talking points to some of those to you as well.
Broke out like the, you know, the discussion session, and it felt like we were able to hear people and just like focus in a little bit more on community questions. But that said, it wasn't, you know, like a broader conversation, but it was really nice to have that one-on-one, and you didn't feel like you were kind of like, you know, under the microscope up there, so that felt better.
Anything else? All right, thanks. Next on the agenda, freedom of information requests. John?
Yeah, there's 3 in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, seeing none. 7.3, fall assessment data update. Danielle?
All right, I am flying solo this evening, so I'm going to just stay put. I'm also thinking that this might be brief because I alluded to earlier that there have been updates and changes to all of the assessments this fall, so I want to give you a little bit of a preview of what all of those changes have been, but we are actually looking at new data in both assessments, both Panorama and NWA this year. So the first thing I want to share is that Panorama, the SEL survey data that I'm presenting tonight, we actually closed the survey on Tuesday. We just released results on Wednesday, so this is really, really fresh. We're just starting some of the analysis at the building and district level, so brand new data, but definitely some changes. And then before I move into the Panorama data, I just want to share with you again that both the content of the assessment and the benchmarks have been updated for the Panorama survey. They reported doing some changes to language, specifically to make it more readable and accessible to students. So there was some word shifting that happened, and actually some simplified vocabulary in the questions to improve the accessibility, and then shorter topics. So the topics actually look a bit different as well. And I shared that survey out when we sent the email about administering the survey so that people could see those questions. But because probably the biggest change is that the reference group is so large now, so many people are using the Panorama survey,
that we're now allowed to sort the reporting by grade band, with the exception of just a couple of the data points. So you can actually compare middle school responses to middle schoolers across the nation and elementary responses to elementary instead of an all band, which you're going to see some pretty significant swings actually in the national comparisons as a result. So let's just take a look at those. Again, this is the student competency measures. So this is the SEL measures, and this is a perception of self survey that we give our students around these topics. And this is the data that we're seeing coming in. So a couple of things. Grit in this new survey has changed to perseverance. Some of the questions in perseverance are actually now pretty heavily linked with that growth mindset. So we're seeing growth, of course, in the perseverance portion, which we've been focusing on, obviously, as a district. We're actually seeing that our lowest scores, or the scores that are falling below the national percentile now, are in that topic of growth mindset. And when you're seeing like 20th percentile there that you're pointing to, like that's elementary students' growth mindset as compared to elementary students' growth mindset across the nation. And then down below middle school now compared to middle school, whereas before we were comparing whomever took the assessment to all kids taking the assessment. So that's why you're seeing that wide
You mind
shift.
just defining growth mindset again?
Yeah, the questions that are actually asked, I figured that was going to come up. So the questions that are asked are like, when you make a mistake, how often do you ask for ways you can do better? That's the one where we're seeing the most challenge, the lowest response rates in our students in elementary schools. We're seeing an average of 22% responding favorably to that. So only about a quarter of our kids are asked, they want to figure out a way to do something better.
Is that
And so you
category? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you want a higher response on that, like I asked 3-4 times to continue to get
They
better.
just want to say that so the questions are broken down as like, I do that often, I do that sometimes, all the way down to I never do that.
Yeah.
And to be in a favorable response, they would be saying it's a regular habit, that they're looking towards improvement. The other questions in growth mindset are relative to like how much they can increase or improve certain aspects of themselves. So they're asked about like how much can they improve their effort in school? How much can they improve their own behavior in school? How much can they improve how smart they are? So I think this sometimes parallels a little bit with the conversations we've been having about grit previously, is that they're not seeing it as something that they control themselves, that their ability to improve is something that they feel strong self-efficacy around. And so that's something we're definitely going to dive into more. Even though you see the differences in like 20th percentile elementary and the comparison to the middle schools being 50th percentile, you see that their response of favorable is pretty comparable. It's just that their norming group is different.
Has growth mindset always been part of Panorama?
It has been, but again, this is now the shift in the language
Yeah.
and the questions and the topics that are surrounding it.
So the perseverance questions, are they different than the grit questions that they used to have?
So they're all the same with the exception of one thing being eliminated, which is that they eliminated the language of long-term goal setting, which was one of the things that was a struggle for our students. They didn't see themselves as setting long-term goals. We had a lot of conversations with them about it, like you actually are. If you play a sport, you play an instrument, you write a paper, you are setting long-term goals and achieving it. But they have eliminated that because it was confusing, I think, for students. The thing in perseverance or grit that remains there, that is where our kids respond like the lowest around, is when they are working on something that matters, but there are distractions, how focused can they stay? And that's where we're seeing them self-reporting that they don't feel strongly about that, their ability to stay focused when there are distractions.
So the change in scoring there, I mean, because that was always, I mean, growth mindset was always an issue as well, but there was a huge, I mean, that was an area of focus for us. So the question becomes, is it a change in how it's being measured that's now created this uplift? Or is it actually the efforts that we've been taking Is that right?
Which is why you always hate
Yeah,
renorming when it
right.
happens, or new content happening, because then you lose some insight. Like, we're gonna have to dig a little bit deeper
Okay.
into each individual question to
Okay.
really know, like, what the impact has been.
Got it. Okay.
And there's always cautions when these places do renorm or recontent about doing a lot of year-over-year comparison. They're almost saying, like, see it as as an opportunity for reset and refocus in your organization.
Sorry, Mike, does Panorama also then give, because of the data they have, do they then give like success drivers for growth mindset or possible derailers that are happening
There-
for growth mindset, so to allow you guys to kind of dive and focus in on?
Yeah, so that's actually why we use it for SEL, like, we can use it for planning purposes. So on the teacher platform, there are things that they can go into to actually, like, lesson plan around developing those skills and mindsets in students. And then you'll also see on the parent report, which we are hoping to have ready by parent-teacher conferences, it gives parents that same thing. Like, if you're seeing low indicator in this, like, try this. Ask these questions. And so that's the purpose of it. Again, this is self-perception. They may be really good at some of those things, but the way they see themselves is that it's not a strength, that it's an opportunity for growth.
When do we see this again? The next time? Is this
We do
the-
it in winter again, so this is an assessment we always give in October and now in February.
Okay.
So, because we want it to be data that we can then act upon.
I'm just thinking about what you just said a moment ago about needing to dig into the specific questions. I'm personally super interested in that before February. I don't know if other people would be. I don't want to speak for the board.
I think.
Is that something that we'd be presented?
I think that's the intent, right?
Yeah,
Just
well,
wanna
we'll
make sure.
definitely be doing it behind the scenes, and I can certainly provide,
That'd be
you know,
really cool. Thank you.
some additional insight.
Danielle,
You're
can,
just selfishly trying to react to that data as quick as possible because you're gonna retest in February and you want to see scores
Yeah,
jump, right? So
absolutely.
you want to act now, sorry.
Yes, yeah. And our teams, like, as soon as we release results, everybody is, like, if they can't get in, we hear it. They're interested in wanting to see it.
Danielle, relative to the renorming, can you go through just a couple of the key changes, not exact numbers, but if somebody sees this for the first time, they might not be clear what we're talking about here. So, hey, this renorming did this and this and this relative to what we're looking at now.
Well, I mean, we've always seen, so we're seeing some significant increases in the national comparison for our middle schools because they're now being compared to other middle schoolers instead of all. Like, when the elementaries were being compared to our middle schoolers, we were seeing lower percentiles. We have traditionally, though, always reported on this, that grit, since 2019, which is when we began administering this, grit was always like our lowest comparison to peers across the nation. Our students had always done that. Contrary to that, they'd always also said that supportive relationships were the strongest pieces. And now we're seeing some things, I mean, it's still hugely strong, but we're seeing some things that are even surpassing that just because of the changes. So I would say that's the shift, if that answers it.
I'm not super concerned about the norms just yet because they've changed, but I like the percentages that they're saying now versus the percentage that we were having
Yeah.
before. I think that's what's more
Yeah.
important to me. About,
Yep.
comparing us to us. I think is,
Yeah.
Are you also able to see, like, actual percentages based on grades
Yes.
as well? Okay.
So the way our platform works, like, we can, like, dial down into, I mean, obviously, we'll see student results in our platform. That's where our teachers can have conversations with students about their own responses. But we really look at it at a building level by grade, by cohort, by school, to see if there's changes. Like, one of the interesting things that I noticed right away in the data is I was seeing if there was any differences in our middle school responses, and literally they are 1 to 2 percentage points away from each other in every single area. Like, despite being 2 schools across town, like, our kids are responding almost identically. It's wild.
With our new Stronger Together campaign, do we share student-level results with SEL, with the parents? We know that kids spend 13% of their time in our schools,
Yep.
and that's a whole lot of time outside of school. This information as a parent, at least to me, would be very important on how my student is doing. And have we shared that information with parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this year, because
Maybe will you show
we've
me
already done the
where-
map, I can show a parent
Okay.
report. We've already mailed the map reports, and this timing is a little bit separate. So what we're hoping to do is run the parent report so that we can hand them out potentially at conferences. And people who aren't at conferences, then,
Got
you know,
it.
we would send the mailer thereafter.
So it's grades 3 through 5, and then this fall, we didn't send out Panorama in the map that came.
No, because we administered later, so we
Got it.
separated
That's
the
why I didn't
windows
see it.
intentionally. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah,
I think
we've
I'll-
sometimes given the assessments, this assessment and the survey concurrently, but this year we intentionally separated them. So we did map, like
Okay.
in the first couple of weeks of school, and then we just administered the SEL survey in early October. And some of that was intentional as well. We knew there was some renorming, but also we want to have students be able to be reflective of the experience they're now in and not the one they were coming from. So giving them 5 or 6 weeks to settle into a new school year gets more relative feedback.
And then just a quick follow-up on that. Do you feel that we do a nice job of so we take this baseline data and give it to the families? Is there a collaboration between the families that get this report and within the schools on the actual child? Is it done at the conferences? Is there some sort of formal process where?
Sometimes, like when there is something, so some of the things that students self-report, there's already collaboration happening around that, and there's an awareness of
Okay.
that sentiment. Typically, the collaboration that grows out of this survey between a family and a school, or a family and a teacher, is when something comes up that we didn't suspect, right?
Okay.
That a student is showing a result that we've not had conversation about, like, why are they feeling that way? Let's talk about that. So actually, the conference timing could be beneficial.
Okay, thank you.
And I think to that point, based off our conversation that we just had in the committee of the whole, right, is that productive struggle and the process being more important than the end or the outcome. This is a perfect example of that, right? Growth mindset is all about process. It's all about that
Yes.
process of not necessarily failing or having a challenge and then wanting to improve and finding that process and that system for themselves, right, in order to do that. So I think this is just yet another indicator of that whole conversation and then, the work of the administration in order to figure out, what does that next evolution of education look like in order to get there, so.
So if you want to see a shocking difference now through the Panorama survey because of the national comparison and the ability to separate middle school with middle school and elementary with elementary, now look at the environment survey, which includes sense of belonging, engagement, which we've talked a lot about, rigor, valuing a school and school climate. And I'm going to just, it's fascinating, but now that middle schools are being compared to middle schools, now look at our engagement. It's striking, it still aligns with I was going to say, it still aligns with what I've been reporting all along, which is that Gallup poll trend that we've seen over time, is that engagement for students as they go through the trajectory of their education begins to decline. So like, even though engagement is being reported at lower levels in our middle schools than it is in our engagement level, than it is in our elementary schools, it is now the 90th percentile in the nation as compared to other middle schools, because that's how middle schools are reporting low engagement everywhere. So I see the national comparison, but it's still, we have committed to and said, like, we want more than 43% or 46% of our kids reporting high engagement. So we're, going to be continuing to work around that. And then to a little bit of the earlier conversation, the only other thing that you see there that is new in this that is showing up as a lower percentile is that valuing of school for grades 3 through 5. But that really boils down to one response within that that I was able to delineate quickly today. And there's a question in that about the relevance. The question for kids is, how often do you use the ideas that you learn in school in your life? Relevance is my word, right? And that one they're reporting low. Tough question.
I mean, they're elementary school kids.
Yes, yeah. So, new questions, we'll be doing some new unpacking, and I've already kind of summarized a lot of what we were talking about here, but when you see on this slide, the ranges, like, I broke down growth mindset and I broke down engagement specifically, because I think those are two things we're gonna dive into quickly, and when you see the ranges, like, that's the elementary to middle school range. So, like that first question, when you make a mistake, how often do you ask for ways to do better? 22% of our elementary students were saying, responding favorably, as compared to 45% of our middle schools. So the first number is always elementary, the second number, middle
So for
school.
how excited you are to go to school, only 28% of middle schoolers?
Yes, yeah.
Shocker, that it's
So-
28%. That's amazing.
And we're 90th percentile in the nation.
My kids are like, I don't want to go.
Hello, reality.
How much of that, though, is where, as they're getting older, there's more of that
get 'em
independence
out of bed.
that's coming with them, is, you know?
Your best day.
And
I mean, that is yeah, I mean, now they've been through a school routine that has looked very familiar. There is this, I think there is this passion, particularly from kids, about wanting something new and different. You know, they would like to see something new and different.
I think engagement is hard because it's so holistic. It's not just curriculum, it's social interactions as
Absolutely.
well. And it,
and that collaborative work.
yeah, and it changes drastically from elementary to middle school, right?
Yes.
Like what those look like and how those are demonstrated. But yeah, I think, again, a tough nut to crack, but.
Yeah. Yeah, and definitely social factors, like they see themselves as focused, but how excited are they? Like, I don't know how many, how excited or how interested, like a lot of middle schoolers might just think, like, it might not be cool to say I'm excited to do things. I don't know. Like, but those are that's what elicits, that's why the survey is great, because it elicits the opportunity to have great conversations with kids. All right, so that is quick panorama, and now I want to talk a little bit about the changes to MAP, and there are lots of slides here, but I'm going to go through them quickly because I just want to give you like the broad strokes here, similar to what we've done with our staff, but I also included some information in the letter that came with MAP parent reports. So essentially, NWEA didn't just update their norms, but they also updated their algorithm for how the test is administered. So they did both concurrently, which changes the ballgame all over the place. But that algorithm, what they did was they aligned questions to grade level standards as the priority. And they did that purposely because they were wanting to strengthen the connection with the assessment to actually what's happening in classrooms. What that means from a testing perspective is that, like, this is an example of 200 RIT. Like if a child had 200 RIT, there are questions that are in the 200 RIT level that span all grade levels. What the test was doing previously was just reaching into that bag and grabbing a random question from any grade level that was at 200 RIT and asking that question. So a kid might be getting a 7th grade 200 RIT question, but then a 3rd grade 200 RIT question. What they've done to update the test is they're focusing on 200 RIT level questions at their grade level first. So they get those questions first, and then when those questions they run out of those questions, then they start to expand, right? Then they start to move to like maybe another RIT band at the same grade level and start asking questions from there. And then when necessary, they draw items from other grades. But the grade level remains the focus, which means kids aren't experiencing questions that feel like incredibly easy or incredibly hard. They're fielding questions that feel familiar first, which is actually a good update. In addition to changing the test, though, they also did update the norms, which they do every 3 to 5 years. This is a huge reference group that you see there. But it does give us new context around the kids' current peers. And what I'm trying to make sure everyone knows is that the RIT scale hasn't changed. The tests change, and definitely you are seeing changes in your percentiles. And there are larger shifts that are occurring at the lower achievement percentiles than are occurring at the higher achievement. And those are even variable across tests, reading, and math. So these are actual data points. These are our own kids here in district, just to give you some comparison. Like a 201 last year, a 201 RIT score last year in 4th grade reading would have been 60th percentile. Now it's 62nd percentile. Go across the way to math, a 204 in math. Last year was 60th percentile, now it's 68th percentile because the norming group has shifted. And you see that, like, you see it definitely shifting more at that 60th percentile and below than it is at the 80th and 95th percentile there. This is just to show you what that looks like in the spring. So right now, we're in the fall. In the spring, it's going to shift again because growth also changes because of all of these updates. So there's variability. Like that's what they're anticipating in terms of changes in RIT and percentile. You just see there in reading, the scores have gone down overall everywhere. Like there's a change in the norming group in all places in reading. In math, there's the variability. So for those kids who are in fourth grade, 75th percentile and up, somehow in the last 5 years, their scores have actually increased while everyone else's has gone down. So that is what we can anticipate potentially seeing as shifts in percentiles in our district as well. But we have to let the year play out.
Isn't that when COVID started?
Yeah, we renormed right before COVID. So that's why NWEA is saying, like, be really careful about interpreting, which is why I'm not doing a lot of comparative data this evening, is because they're saying lots of factors are playing into your assessments. The pandemic played into that. We have a new algorithm in the test, and we have a new comparison group. So, like, let the year play out. Like, lots has changed here. So, quickly, you're not seeing all the years of previous data before because they're saying don't compare it, so I'm not going to. The RIT score in our students as compared to the national norm, we're still seeing similar trends. Our kids are about 10 to 25 points above the national RIT level, above the national mean, and the gap widens as kids go through our system. It gets bigger in math. In third grade, the point of this comparison is still the same as what we've previously done. So like a 196.7 is our mean in District 109. That's third grade fall for us. Everywhere else in the nation, that's spring of third grade or the beginning of fourth grade. As an example, then for sixth grade, our mean is a 222. Everywhere else, that would be end of seventh grade or early eighth grade. So that's where you see the gap widening. I did put the cohort data on here, but again, this is really, really cautionary tale for us. We have to just look across, really, instead of comparing them to their peers now. Not that we should have necessarily ever compared them to their peers, but what we're looking for most importantly is that that cohorts are seeing growth over time, from year to year that we're seeing typical growth. And we are, so that's also good. And then ECRA, of course, does our reports here. And so what you're seeing right now, again, fall can be kind of wonky because fall is some loss of learning that occurs over the summer, so summer regression. But right now we're seeing that all of our kids in the fall, even since they were benchmarked right before the end of school, they still are retaining most of their information. They're set to meet their benchmarks with that exception of third grade as a cohort, which we'll just be paying attention to. We'll have to do a little bit, we'll have to see some more growth for them between fall and winter to get them back on track again.
Just to answer for one question, my brain's not working. Growth effect size, what they're green, most of them except for the yellow. Tell me what that means again. I'm sorry. Why they're all negative?
Yeah,
What does that
so
mean?
the range for green growth is actually positive 30.3 to negative 0.3. That's the standard deviation of error, essentially. So everything within that range would be considered that they're tracking as expected. When you start to see, and it takes a certain cohort size to actually like bump to that level, and our cohorts are all big enough to do that. When you get to like a negative or a positive 0.3, then you start to see blue growth or yellow growth. So a positive 0.3 would be blue, that they're actually exceeding their growth expectations. A negative 3.0 or greater would be red. Yellow growth, as you see there. A negative 0.6 is actually red growth. So we're on the crux. Like if you look at 1, 2, and 3, we're like, we're going to need to do some things, obviously, in 1, 2, and 3, but I actually think that's like really timely and why we actually made the change in curriculum that we did. I put that on here, like, we're obviously implementing a new math curriculum. Our primary grades were some of the loudest voices in that curriculum review saying, like, it's time for a change. We need things that are more hands-on, more engaging for kids. It also, the curriculum shift we made, as we've shared, is a lot about procedural, but also conceptual fluency. So developing strong number sense in kids is certainly something that we're paying attention to at those lower levels. So,
Thanks, yeah. I'm noticing in the reading too, I mean, none of them are positive.
yes. yeah.
Zero. There's one that's a 0, right?
Yeah.
But everything
Which-
is.
And
Which
so
is-
do you want a higher number at the percent benchmark, right? Met
Yeah, I'm just
benchmark?
making sure.
Ideally, so the percent of MET benchmark would be if you tested kids now on end-of-year grade level, they would be proficient. So
Yes.
if we
Oh, yeah,
tested
it's
our
end of
first
year, yeah.
graders, if we tested our first graders right now on end-of-year first grade, 90% would probably be proficient. So that's where they are in the fall. Yeah, but like sixth grade, in sixth grade always sees a dip because there's another change in NWA assessment that happens in sixth grade.
So then expected growth percentage, that's like on target for now, right? Because this is fall, and if we have a high percentage of expected growth, that means we expect them to meet benchmark by the end of their grade level, the end of spring.
So growth is a comparison to self,
Yeah.
yep. So each of them have the individual growth measures that are set for students based on their previous experience with growth, and then this is as a cohort. Yeah, so we ideally want to see individual students all in green growth and cohorts
Sure.
in green growth. But you ask a critical question, which is also what we advise our staff to do when we're doing analysis of data. We need kids to grow. We also have to look at that proficiency benchmark, that they're tracking to meet end of grade level standards. It's a both, not a one or the other.
Yeah. Mitch, is your concern related to the negative?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's timing, fall, right?
It is.
So it's that learning loss that you have over the summer?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we literally
Yeah.
tested them in middle part of May. They went away for the summer, and then we tested them the second week of school that they came back. So it is about retention, regression.
Yeah, that's what I was assuming. Hopefully something different. That's why the green in the next one will still be -3 to +3, or will it?
In the
not?
winter? No,
Yes.
hopefully we'll start seeing changes or shifts.
Will green still be?
Yeah.
like-
Oh, yes.
The
yeah,
the
that
deviation
stays
is the same.
Green is-
But you should see,
Yes.
you should see the cohorts be closer into that 0 positive area, hopefully, right? Because now they've had a full semester plus, right?
Right.
At that point in
The
there,
growth
so.
effect size does not change. It's
Yeah,
always.
but-
I guess the
Yes.
reason I was thinking green makes sense now to be -3 because there'd be learning loss. I wouldn't assume there'd be so much learning loss between now and the next one, so why green would still be learning loss?
They'll be in that range, -3 to positive 0.3. So they should be hopefully closer to the positive side of the house versus the negative side of the
Right.
house.
I mean, and what they would say is like, because of standard deviation, as long as they're in green, they're growing as expected.
Growth
Right.
that's expected is 0, like it's essentially 0 plus or minus.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Plus or
Uh-huh.
minus 3. Yep.
Danielle, do we have to take the map 2 weeks after school starts?
You know what? No, but what we do is we set windows that are equidistant from each other, so we administer 3 times a year. Again, it's about trying to get actionable data for kids. We no longer assess kindergarten, by the way. Kindergarten doesn't take it until winter, but we try to do it as early as we can, get it out of the way, and then engage kids in real instruction.
Okay.
Whether or not that's right, like we continue to have conversation with, like we just had conversation with our para-joint committee, which is representatives of our union and teachers last year around that same topic.
Okay.
And the timing was mutually agreed.
So the change in the algorithm, did you see, I mean, maybe you haven't had time yet to dig into the data, because what I noticed, and this is anecdotal with my own kids, because I got, 3 of them, but 2 of them came back with these, is that what I saw was that there was, the areas where they grew, it was wider, meaning that they had a higher risk score it was a much bigger change in the risk score to the upside, but when they were to the downside, it was a bigger downside as well. Are you seeing that in the?
I don't know if we're seeing that
Or it
trend.
might just be
over-
anecdotal,
I don't,
but, yeah.
I don't know if we're seeing that trend overall. They're saying like RIT score is still comparable, but it could be shifting on individual student
Yeah.
results because they're seeing different questions.
Okay.
And then ELA, same thing. So our ELA scores were 7 to 13 points above the national mean. What we see in reading is different from math, so the gap grows in math. It stays pretty consistent in reading. We're not growing the gap there as much, but we're maintaining the gap. Same thing, though, occurs. So third grade mean here, equivalent to end of third grade, early fourth, sixth grade mean, end of seventh grade, early eighth as a comparison. So that looks pretty similar to what we saw in math. And then the same thing with the cohort data, just cautionary. We would just be looking at growth, which we're continuing to see. One of the really great things, and the great things about reading that I would have to report is that, like, obviously, we're seeing all green growth across grades. We just were finishing year one of an ELA adoption. Sometimes you see implementation dips. We actually didn't see that, and our teachers last year were really, really thrilled in the spring. I don't know if I shared a spring update with you, but we actually saw green and blue growth in the spring, particularly in our elementary grades, which was very exciting because you're seeing outcomes relative to implementation shifts, specific to the science of reading, actually. So that's a good thing.
That was my question, because for both ELA and math, we're in either year one or year two of a new curriculum cycle. So with them renorming and doing all these massive changes, is this map data still, is like the raw RIT still a valuable part for?
Yes. Yeah, so if we're looking at updating anything, we're going to probably just look at RIT, because
Okay.
RIT is the one thing that stays consistent while percentiles changed for norming. And I do, like, we're in year one of math this year, so I don't know what to expect. Like, we could have an implementation dip. It's definitely a change in instructional practice, but we'll see what it looks like when we come in winter.
Yeah, see, look at that.
Agree, because it definitely is inspiring productive struggle.
So
is.
fun thing, first grade reading, 99% of them are already meeting. So
Right.
what are we doing with those kids, right? I mean, so we're hoping that, what's the next step?
So
for
one of the
that?
Send them home.
I'm like, what's the curriculum now? I mean, obviously, you can't do first
Right.
grade curriculum anymore once
One of
they've
the
already met.
cautionary things about K-1 assessment on NWEA is that the assessment in K-1 is actually read to them. So it's a test of listening comprehension versus reading comprehension. Of course, we have kids who are doing amazing, and then when that's your norm, though, you adjust, right? You adjust.
Isn't that why we get a drop in second grade, because now they're actually reading it?
Right,
versus-
that's
okay.
correct. Yeah, they have to read to self. Yep. All right, that's all I've got.
Don't ask any
Thank you, Danielle. Nice job.
Let him say his thing.
Now the fun stuff.
Thank you.
No Bennett?
All right. Thank you, Danielle. All right, 7.4, resolution of Board of Education of Deerfield Public Schools, District 109, authorizing a notice of remedy and ratification of unpaid suspension. Dale.
So just want to lay out at the jump that this is not going to be a discussion or an explanation of the incident that you're aware of. It would be wholly inappropriate to talk about that in open session. Because we do so few of these, our legal counsel advised Mike and I that we share a synopsis of how we come to the point where you would actually vote on a resolution authorizing a notice of remedy and an unpaid suspension. So I have done sessions where I train administrators across the state on how to run an effective investigation, 8 hours. So I'm going to give you the 3-minute synopsis here. That being said, there's 3 big terms that I want you to know in regards to how we came to this point. 1 is an umbrella term, and 2 fall underneath that umbrella. Due process. I'm sure sometime in the last 6 months you've probably heard the phrase due process. 6 months ago, most of us couldn't pinpoint where you would find that. In the Constitution, it's actually under the Fifth Amendment, and it states that no one shall be deprived life, liberty, or, not the pursuit of happiness, I just trapped you there, sorry. It is actually, it's property, property. And when we say property, we're not talking about your home per se or your car per se, we're talking about property rights, such as your job, if you pass a probationary period, pay, benefits, your tenure status. Those are all property rights that you earn. The two terms that fall underneath due process and making sure we don't violate the due process provision of the Fifth Amendment is, have you gone through progressive discipline? Progressive is what it sounds like. You know, you inch up because remember, discipline is supposed to remediate behavior. So we all want to jump to something right away like, somebody did this, well, then we should fire them. That's not how it works, and it's never worked that way. It has to be in line with consequences for the actions, with hopes of remediating the behavior, until you get to a point where that's not happening and you end up with a discussion we're having tonight. So due process is the umbrella, progressive discipline is one aspect of it, and the other more important aspect for what we're doing here are just cause. I say just cause, and it's not to be phrased as, well, we're doing this just because. A just cause is, have you satisfied the right reasons for wanting to pursue something, like a notice to remedy or a suspension without pay? To that extent, there's 7 tests to determine if you have just cause to get to this point. So the first test of just cause is there adequate notice to employees of what is appropriate behavior? And that doesn't mean that we have to walk around with a list and say, these are all the things you're expected to do. Those are outlined in policy and procedure. For the most part, handbooks, job descriptions, school code, law, educator ethics, all that falls underneath the first test of just cause. So are all those things in place? The second, were the employer's rules or orders related to the efficient and or safe operations of the district? So if we feel that the behavior flies in the face of safe and efficient operations, that satisfies the second test of just cause to pursue that. The third and fourth are kind of similar. One is a little bit more baseline than the other. Did you conduct an investigation? You can't just rush to, like, here's the consequence and not do an investigation. But then the fourth test is, was that investigation thorough? Was it something that is fair? Did you make sure that you weren't passing any judgment throughout the investigation and you heard all parties? The fifth is, do you have evidence of misconduct or proof that something actually occurred? It seems strange that that is one of the tests, but it actually, you can't just decide, well, I didn't like the way things shook out, but I don't have enough evidence. If you don't have the evidence, you can't go any further. Sixth one is, were the rules, orders, and consequences even-handedly applied and without discrimination? Again, you can't just cherry pick who you want to administer discipline to without satisfying the sixth test of just cause. And then finally, were the consequences related to the seriousness of the offense and past record? Seventh test of just cause goes right in line with progressive discipline, which is the consequences that you're rendering, do those match up to what we're actually finding in the investigation? It doesn't mean that you can't find something so egregious that you would jump the progressive discipline and say, this is really far out there. Like, there are some things that are so out of line. You could terminate someone right after the incident were to occur. But generally, it has to match the seriousness of the offense. So again, due process is something that we're all entitled to under the Constitution, Fifth Amendment. Can't deprive someone of life, liberty, and property is that third piece. And what would happen here, a suspension without pay, is taking away property from somebody. You should be asking in your mind, does that satisfy the seven tests of just cause? That's the investigation that I oversee for the system. And does it match progressive discipline, meaning were some things easier up front? Did you provide notice? Did you provide verbal warnings? Did you provide written warnings? Did you provide written reprimands? Did you get to suspension without pay? Did you get to notice to remedy? And remember, a notice to remedy means that this is really your last warning to say anything that happens beyond this that's egregious, it's probably going to lead to further discipline up to and including termination. Questions on the process? That's the 3-minute synopsis of an 8-hour training session.
I expect my credit on my IASB records.
And you're going to get it.
I was very thorough.
There's one more level. Thank you, Dale.
Sure.
Any questions? All right. Next on the agenda is 7.5, 2025 tax levy.
John, you also have 3 minutes.
Well, we will be swift. We will start with tax levy terms, look at a levy and extension timeline, and then detail the 2025 tax levy recommendation. So always begin with a distinction between the levy and the extension. The levy is the request that the Board of Education is making, and the extension is the total actual amount that will be extended to the school district as billed to taxpayers. And the reason that there is a difference between a levy and the extension is that we are forced by the timelines and statutes to make a request when we know half of the equation that drives the tax levy calculation. At this point in time, we know that the consumer price index at December 31, 2024 was 2.9%. That is one half of the equation. The other piece is the equalized assessed value of all property within the taxing district, and that is an estimate at this point. So we receive an estimate from the county, and we build the tax levy based on that estimate. We are a district that is subject to the tax cap. The tax cap has been enacted and in place for District 109 since the early 90s. And it means that our extension is limited to the lesser of the prior year's consumer price index or 5%, whichever is less. So if many of you on the board will recall that for the first time since the tax cap law was put into place, we actually did hit that 5% cap when we had CPI in excess, it was 7% and I think 6.5% the year thereafter. What is not subject to the cap is any new property that comes onto the tax rolls. That can be in the form of newly constructed property that is initially taxed, or it could be in the form of an expiring TIF district. The tax levy timeline is one that touches 4 years like most business office processes. We start by looking back to CPI at December 31 in the 2024, and that, as I indicated, is a driver in this calculation. And then we advance to the end of 2025 where we are now. The Finance Committee met in early October to review financial projections as well as a draft of the proposed tax levy. And then in November, the board will meet and hold a public hearing on that tax levy and approve the tax levy so that we can file it in December. And then we wait until the county will establish the actual extension sometime in April, and we use that to build the budget for 26-27, and those taxes are generally collected in June through September, October of 2026. Again, on October 6th, the Finance Committee met. We looked at your financial projections and discussed in detail the 2025 tax levy, and the recommendation is to increase the tax levy at 2.9%. Also to pass the supplemental resolution to capture the debt service extension base increase. So when they initiated the tax cap, created a situation where taxing bodies had a debt service extension base that was frozen based off of the debt that the district carried at that time. In recent years, the legislature enacted the ability for a taxing body to increase that debt service extension base by increases in CPI and EAV. And what that means is that our debt service extension base, if we pass this supplemental levy, just notches up a bit over time with CPI and changes to EAV. And again, in the board packet, there is a detailed document, and the detailed calculations are found on page 13 and 14. So the next steps, even though we are not required to do so, the district has traditionally held a truth in taxation hearing, which means we will publish notice in the newspaper in a format that is required by the legislature. And then Ryan will lead us in a hearing where he asks 3 times for public comment. And we will request board action following the hearing in November. And once the board acts, we will file the appropriate resolutions with the county clerk before the last Tuesday in December. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Kind of adjacent to the tax levy, there was a period of time where you were referencing some recapturing of dollars, I think was related potentially to the debt. I could be off. Walk me through what that was, and is that reoccur, or was that a one-time moment?
It is, what you're referencing is the recapture levy. I think this is the third or fourth year that it has been in play. What that is separate from the tax cap, and it's separate from the debt service extension base. What it is if taxes are not collected,
Right.
then those taxes that are not collected in a prior year, and it can be for a reason such as a property owner receives a property tax appeal and their tax bill is lowered and they pay a lesser tax, that is aggregated and then spread across all of taxing parcels within the district, and those dollars are collected in the next year. So, for instance, in the 2024 levy that we're collecting to fund the current year, that recapture levy was just over $500,000. So we can't forecast what that would be. We have, the county clerk will calculate that independent of anything that we submit.
Right, but there's nothing on our end we have to do,
Correct.
vote for, et
Correct.
cetera. That's an
Correct.
automatic by
Correct.
the, okay,
Yes.
cool, thanks.
I got one, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this earlier. What would lead a district to pass the debt service extension 1 year and maybe not another year? How would one make the decision to do that?
I think it's, I think it goes along the lines of where the district was at one point in time. District 109 was abating the debt service levy, in anticipation of capital needs, reinstated the debt service levy. So if there wasn't need there, you wouldn't necessarily need to pass that.
It's all about a philosophy on the board in terms of obviously the best, collection and allocation of taxpayer dollars. So if you're in a period of time, which at the time, 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, we were in a position where we had our percentage reserve was creeping up, was beyond where we as a board wanted to aim it at. And so we abate, one of the triggers without hurting the district on a long-term basis was to abate the debt levy. And so that's what we did for a number of years. But as I think a few years ago, we knew we were going into this master facility planning process and we needed to capture as much as we could in order to offset the impact of a potential referendum, that's when we reinstated it. So should we get into that position again post-referendum, or should we have that referendum, say a number of years down the road, we're like, hey, we are aiming for that percentage in our reserve and it's creeping up again, that's the lever that we can use without necessarily having a long-term impact to our financial status. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm looking at the exhibits that you sent out. It looks like we will be likely doing this in the future as well, based on the number, the big numbers that are in row A.
Correct.
Yeah.
Although our debt service will increase also
Right.
based off of what we're going to do.
That's
So,
correct. Thank you, guys.
any other questions? All right, 7.6. Mitch, hold on to your seats. Illinois State IASB 2025 Resolutions Committee Report and Constitutional
I
Amendments
hereby
for
nominate
consideration.
Ryan Kuo.
I have already volunteered. I've already volunteered to take
We're so
the
proud of
the
you,
vote
Ryan.
for you.
Yeah.
I am. And here's the reason why. There is only one thing to vote on.
Not the constitutional amendment?
So those are the easy ones, I think. So just to quickly go through it, and thank you for writing this, Becky, but I took some notes this time, actually. So you have the school bus safety funding, so that's the first one. That is, right now, is currently an unfunded mandate by the state in terms of putting in 3-point harnesses in 2031. And so this is a resolution to advocate for funding associated with that mandate.
And
Yeah.
Ray and David, if I'm presuming that you, I don't want to presume, but do you understand what the intentionality behind this whole committee is?
I do not.
Okay.
Okay.
I didn't want to presume over there. So Ryan, do you want
Sure,
to
yeah.
lend some insight as to what this group is?
We'll kill two birds with one stone, actually, because I was actually at the ISB Lake County Legislative meeting last week, which was my privilege to go to.
He wants to get a little thingy on his badge.
Alone?
But
Were you, just you?
yeah, it was just me. I was all alone. And so basically what happens, and there was a representative there, I was talking to Mike, actually was super impressive, Representative Syed.
I was?
No,
Well, I told you.
Representative
I was telling you, but yeah. So she made a really good point of, hey, you know, as a legislator, there's a lot of things, a lot of topics on their plate. And, you know, if you don't have somebody that's in your face telling you, hey, this is an issue, you should pay attention to this, then it's something that they don't pay attention to and they don't get voted, they don't vote on it, right? And so what this is the ISB is by its formation is primarily a advocacy body, right? So it takes the issues of the school boards within the state and it advocates on our behalf to the state legislature to get legislation changed, okay? Mostly to secure funding is kind of the primary purpose. But from time to time, they'll advocate. In the past, we've done anywhere between 6 and 12. I've seen 15 topics where where we would get into delegates, all the school boards will have a representative there and say, yes, we support this. Yes, IASB, you should advocate as a group on our behalf for this specific topic, right? To get this legislation changed. So that's what I have now volunteered to do, is to vote on your behalf to represent you guys, right? And our decision as a board of what we're going to support. Then if everybody supports that, then they will go and advocate for that. This year, it's one thing, and it is the school bus safety funding. So there's a ton of unfunded mandates, which is Mike's favorite topic, where the state and the federal government sometimes will put a requirement on school boards and then say, you must do this, and it costs us money, and they don't fund it. And so it just comes out of our budget. This is one of those where you may agree with the outcome of putting safety harnesses in all school buses. They have not put any money behind it, so it means all the schools have to now pay for that, right? So this is advocacy in order to get that funding. It does have an exception for smaller school districts to give them a little bit more time as well to do it. But is there any questions on that? Does anybody have any?
Everybody, is it 51, is it majority or?
It's
everybody?
majority, yeah, majority vote.
This is at the Triple I conference on Saturday morning. There's a whole
Yeah.
big meeting of delegates. What each district has.
There's like
one delegate.
hundreds of.
And
It is.
I hope you vote one by one.
Roll call, please.
They used to. Yeah. It's a clicker.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, so the whole intentionality tonight for what's on our agenda is to direct Ryan how to vote, and Ryan's vote and the collective vote of the group is to simply direct this IASB group to put dollars and time behind their advocacy. So we're not voting on any legislation or where, it's just what we'd like them to advocate for on our behalf.
So I'm a little bit inaccurate. There's actually two things that we're going to end up voting on at this, but the first one only one that really matters is the school bus safety funding. And so when we get to the voting part of our meeting tonight, right, we'll ask you guys to vote basically to authorize me to be the voting party, right, and then to follow the direction of the board in what we're saying. So right now is the discussion, and what we're trying to get to is everybody in agreement that I should vote in favor of or to adopt that resolution in order to advocate for funding for school bus safety? Is everybody good?
So this is a question time, or, I mean.
Yeah, this is a question, but.
I don't have any questions, but we vote later for the.
Yeah, we vote later, but what I want right now is if everybody's in agreement on that. Yep, okay, all right. So then the second thing is there's 10 changes to the constitution of the IASB. I'll be honest with you, most of them are, the first portion of it's all just language cleanup, right? And I am not Sari, because Sari will go through this, and she was a lawyer, she knew exactly, like, it's language cleanup, it's a lot of legal gobbledygook, all right? But then there's certain things in here that I'll point out, right? One is that it is creating some level of flexibility for the board of directors at ISB and the resolutions committee to make some subjective decisions. Let's put it that way, right? So my recommendation is that they're going to do it in a consent agenda. All 10 are going to be voted all in one vote. Unless somebody objects to one of those, then they'll pull it out.
You want to be that
Let's
guy.
hope they do.
Now, yeah, if I really wanted to make it painful, I will be that guy of that, but I don't think it's worth it. Let's put it that way. That's my recommendation, is that there is a consent. Now, I will say that there may be a district that may that will pull something out. So basically, what it's basically saying is that, hey, we're going to do some cleanup in terms of what we're going to call active members versus non-active or honorary or legacy members. So that's a big piece of it. The other one is that they voted for, they would elect officers for 2 consecutive one-year terms, but in the thing it had as one-year terms with a limitation of 2 terms consecutively. So they're like, we never do that. We only do 2, so we're going to do a 2-year term. That's fine, right? The other major one in here was just cleanup that we're no longer part of the National Association of School Boards. We're now part of COSB or COSBA. COSBA, not Cosby, COSBA, right? And so they're just cleaning up that language. But the 2 that I saw in here that could create an issue is, one, how you bring a resolution to the delegate assembly. There's a timeline associated with it. There used to be exceptions to that timeline where they could accept something in late. They're killing that exception, so you have to get in 150 days in advance now. I don't think that's a problem, but it basically just creates a limitation. I think there are a couple school districts that might have, knowing the school districts that have brought up some of these, that may not like that. And then the second one that I see as a problem or a potential issue is that there used to be a way to nominate officers from the floor, although I don't think in my time it's never happened that I've heard of. But now they're saying, hey, you have to have your paperwork in to be nominated even from the floor by the August quarterly meeting when they select their who they're going to nominate directly. So it creates some limitations, but again, in scenarios that I don't think are that don't happen a lot. Right? So my recommendation is that with all those changes that we just vote yes on the constitutional changes. That said, I might be in there for a while if somebody decides to pull one of those out. And if they do, I'll be sitting right next to them, staring them down with the evil eye, or going to the hotel bar to get a Bloody Mary to bring it back in. So,
Sounds good.
everybody, any questions on those?
I don't think the one even changes the language so much about the 150 days. They're just adding extra. I mean, it says already, it must be done.
There was some exceptions to be able to take in late resolution. That's what they're eliminating. So, all
I'm
right.
good with it.
Any questions? Good?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
All right, moving on. All right, next on the agenda, 8.1 consent agenda. 8.1.1 approval of meeting minutes. 8.1.2 personnel. Or sorry, 8.1.2.1 resignations, retirements, 8.1.2.2 leaves of absence, 8.1.2.3 employment of certified staff, 8.1.2.4 employment of educational support staff, 8.1.2.5 employment of at-will staff, 8.1.3 bills for payment. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Roll call, please.
Ms. Bonner? Aye. Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Jackamue?
Aye.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
Mr. Murav?
Aye.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
And President Quell.
Aye.
Motion carries.
8.2 treasurer's report. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Jackamue?
Aye.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
Mr. Murav?
Aye.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
Ms. Bonner?
Aye.
And President Quell.
Aye.
Motion carries.
8.3 approval of a resolution of the Board of Education Deerfield Public Schools District 109 authorizing a notice of remedy and ratification of unpaid suspension. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Jackamue?
Aye.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
Mr. Murav?
Aye.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
Ms. Bonner?
Aye.
Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
And President Quell.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, 8.4 recommendation to direct the appointed delegate, myself, to vote on the IASB proposed resolutions and constitutional amendments at the delegate assembly at the joint annual conference. May I have a motion to be granted the authority as the board president to discuss and vote upon the proposed IASB resolution and constitutional amendments at the 2025 IASB delegate assembly with independent discretion based off tonight's board consensus.
Absolutely.
I get a-
Move that.
All right,
Second.
roll call, please.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
Mr. Murav?
Aye.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
Ms. Bonner?
Aye.
Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Jackamue?
Aye.
And President Quell.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, there's a term called voluntel that will come into play next year, so just heads up.
It's coming.
It'll be, we're going to bring in a wheel. That's what I'm going to bring in. All right, 8.5, approval of FY26 intergovernmental agreement for GIS school safety mapping. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Muriff?
Aye.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
Ms. Bonner?
Aye.
Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Giacomu?
Aye.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
And President Quall.
Ready.
Motion carries.
All right, 9 committee reports.
We had Finance Committee meeting, October, is it 8th, 6th? Okay, and so we reviewed the 2027 to 31 financial five-year projections with John, which I want to commend the finance department on all your past planning and all your pre-planning and just really trying to, really give us a bandwidth for just, growth all along. And the tax levy, which John just reviewed. And we also reviewed in, sort of in summary, the audit recommendation timeline, which I really want to commend, again, Ben and John on really delving into all of the compliance stuff to just make us feel warm and fuzzy that our tax dollars are being spent the way they should be spent, so.
John
Thank you.
is known warm and fuzzy, the whole finance department.
Free hugs.
Yeah.
What they say about
Are you done? Okay.
That's it.
Mike alluded to, we had a True North Board meeting last night. I know he presented most of it in the superintendent's report. I think as a board, I would like to hear kind of a finality from Laura Knittel about her legal analysis on the financial liabilities, et cetera, related to continuing the pathway of withdrawal, and just getting that kind of in front of the board. Otherwise, any other questions about True North?
Question, when that was originally the final conversation of, following the recommendation to exit, there was a lot of conversation at that time to get some real data either on assets or certain finances that we were going to ask True North to divulge, but then all the conversation went to the new model, and now the conversation is going back. So are those same requests going to bubble back up as far as certain data that we were looking at either before we make a decision?
To this point, there has been a lot of interest from a minority of districts in getting that information. There is a large majority of districts that are interested in retaining the co-op in its now evolved form. And so to date, I think there has not been sufficient force behind the request to provide. It's a significant amount of work potentially, and that request has not been put forth yet.
So just a really high level, because they introduced new articles of agreement. At one point, they were going to try to redline the original ones, and they got to the point where they were all red, so they just started all over again. So it was a lot to absorb, as a board member. They did give a high-level overview. They're looking to change the governance structure. They're going to move away from the day-to-day board operations being run by elected board members and be shifted to superintendents that would be meeting as an executive committee. As the financial model, Mike alluded to a few things. They're proposing no membership fee, but that's for 26, 27. There's a long-term look at this, and the question, is viability-wise, year over year over year, can you maintain that no membership fee? Is a big question. There will be no, it says upon termination or withdraw. So if a district were to withdraw, member districts will relinquish any right to the assets of True North upon withdrawal. So that is new. It used to be in the old articles that you, as a withdrawn district, would retain rights to assets should the district ever dissolve. That's no longer going to be contemplated. The verbalization given at the meeting last night is that if districts want to withdraw, that there wouldn't be any liability penalties that were originally contemplated in the old articles. It used to be anywhere from $1+ million in liabilities. However, outstanding question that I would have is, this entire process of 18-member districts withdrawing has incurred quite a few costs for True North, specifically legal costs. And how does True North anticipate ensuring that those costs are recaptured? And would we be given some type of exiting liability fee or like? I don't perceive, and I could be totally wrong, that a district could just walk away.
So when are these new articles going to be approved?
The great question. They were given a first read last night,
It's a
and
second
the
read, okay.
request is both a second read and a vote November 19th.
Okay, so by the time we exit as a district, potentially these new articles are in place, which would eliminate theoretically, as it's written today, those liabilities unless that changes between now and approval. Is that what you're?
I don't anticipate major language change to these articles. I think we'd have to call a special meeting if they do
Okay.
anything other than semantics or grammar changes. So no, I don't anticipate any changes. I think my question is more some of these uncontemplated, it's not a word, non-contemplated, uncontemplated, finances that if,
How are they going to?
how are they going to recapture? And we have to also recognize too, we've been paying in how many decades to their fund balance? I mean, we walk away from that. So
Okay.
just some things to ponder and mull as we get closer to our district making a recommendation.
Relative to that, our next board meeting, I believe, is on the 20th, and the True North board meeting is on the 19th. The board should
correct.
expect a phone call from me because we won't have a board meeting prior to that, but we may wind up having a resolution of some sort on the 20th. So I will likely be calling each of you to discuss, okay, this is the direction that I think that we are headed, and we'll make some decisions based on feedback I get.
Is there any information about what would happen to the capital funds and/or liability that's owed? How is that then distributed amounts to remaining districts? Is it distributed amounts to remaining districts, or is it just?
Are you referencing if the cooperative were to ever dissolve?
No, if a district leaves, so what happens, like who has ownership on that either capital or debt? Because it's gonna net to something.
The
right?
remaining members,
Yeah.
The remaining
whoever's left in the
members.
pot.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would basically walk away clean, if that makes sense, right? We would have no.
In theory.
In theory, yeah. We would have no liabilities, we would have no assets, but we would also have no fees associated with it, but we would also not be able to utilize the services.
Well, we could as a non-member.
Oh, as a non-member.
But we
right,
would
yeah.
be quite a bit of a surcharge.
Right. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
More to come.
Okay, any more on the committee side? All right. Next on the agenda, open community participation. This is the second opportunity on all topics. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. Sir?
Testing. All right, thanks. Joe Kopsick of Waukegan. Several months ago, one of your students asked critics of your locker room policy why we couldn't simply ask for a private meeting with staff members instead of airing our grievances in public. The reason, of course, is to subject staff members to the same kind of public humiliation to which you subjected the girls who you made change in front of a male student. Maybe now, after hearing the critiques of you and your policy over the last 8 months, you are closer to understanding how those girls felt and why they and their families objected so strongly. You are very lucky that nobody has come up here and ordered you to take your clothes off, as one woman did in another district with a similar policy. In April or May, a gentleman wearing a suit spoke here and said something like, "Outsiders are coming into our community and destroying it. They don't pay taxes here, so they should not have a voice. They are attacking our greatest strength, our diversity." Let me tell you a little bit about the so-called community that we have here in Lake County, Illinois. As a reminder, I grew up in Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. When I was 12 or 13, a parent in the area, Diane M. Ross, was found to have been sending child sexual abuse images over the internet. Principal and later Mayor Kathleen O'Hara declined to convene a town meeting to discuss the incident, despite the fact that Ross had been released after her arrest and was seen at an event in the Lake Bluff Town Square by concerned parents milling about near children as if nothing had happened. On and off between 1976 and 2023, LFHS teacher David Miller sexually abused multiple teenage boys. He was only arrested once and was never sentenced to jail or prison during that 47-year period. And Ross and Miller are just the tip of the iceberg. Charles Ritz, Cynthia Martin, Jonathan Dick, I could go on. In the 2010s, 3 teenage boys threw themselves in front of trains in Lake Forest. Gee, I wonder why they wouldn't want to live in a town that protects child molesters. This is the so-called community that I and other critics of your policy am attacking when I caution you to not add to the anxiety of the people who live here and to refrain from forcing these children to undress in front of a male and adult female staff members. Lake County, Illinois had no community to destroy to begin with. The only community value that Lake County has is the conspiracy of silence, which asserts that this is such a perfect place that no child ever needs to worry about being sexually abused, which makes it the perfect place full of unsuspecting people of whom child abusers can easily take advantage. We've been lulled into a false sense of security. If this is what you call a community, then it deserves to be destroyed. That is why what you have done here with the locker room policy is so dangerous. You made it even easier to abuse and spy on kids here. What you did in February should haunt you for the rest of your lives, and no amount of education will make up for it.
All right. Next on the agenda is closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as the independent contractors in a park. Oh, I apologize. Board superintendent other. Sorry. I marked it off and I shouldn't have. I have one. And who's got any?
Mike, maybe.
In the interest of time, you
Yeah.
guys have been here for a long time,
Yeah.
I'll say, let's wait.
All right. I hit it. It was the legislative. I'll just say this is that EBF ended up, the evidence-based funding ended up being flat in the last legislative session. They did reduce the, what's called mandatory categoricals, which you guys can look it up and it's mind-numbing. There is a cliff in the budget if you're interested in Illinois taxation. That hit because of COVID funding and infrastructure funding that came in. So there's a $700, $800 million gap in the budget that will probably exist for the foreseeable future, which is why the MCATs, as they call it, were reduced. And yeah, that was basically that meeting. So, all right. Next on the agenda, got to go back to it. Closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor in a park, recreational or educational setting, or a volunteer of the public body, or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this Act 5 ILCS 120/2C1. The board will reconvene to open session for the sole purpose of adjournment after the closed session is done. May I have a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Abraham?
Aye.
Ms. Bonner?
Aye.
Dr. Dornfeld?
Aye.
Ms. Jackamue?
Aye.
Ms. Joyce?
Aye.
Mr. Muriff? And President Quill.
Aye.
Motion carries 8:57 PM.
All right. You guys need a quick break?
Yeah.